Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, great. Welcome to a live episode of the FMCG Guys here at Shoptalk. This feels a bit strange, no, to be doing the same thing we do on Zoom, but here with people in front of us and everything. How are you doing? How are you doing with the pressure, Efrain?
I think I'm coping, so it's good to be here.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We're gonna be having a hopefully fun session speaking about e-commerce in the foods category and comparing the two largest markets at either side of the Atlantic. On one side, we'll talk about the German market, which is the biggest market here in Europe, and the US market.
Daniel, to that point, you should mention our special guest.
Well,
actually, both of our special guests, but somebody who came all the way across the Atlantic to join us.
Exactly. We knew there was expectation to see us live, so we've brought you somebody from the other side of the Atlantic. So here is the man known as Sri. Hi, Sri, how are you?
How's it going?
So if anyone doesn't know Sri is the co-host of the CPG Guys podcast in the US, which is like our older sister podcast, we can call it like that. And until
older, wiser sister.
Exactly.
Wiser, I don't know. Older, maybe.
Wiser for sure. And until recently, Chief Customer Officer for General Mills in the US. And on the other side, all the way from Germany, we have Christoph Sterkel. Hi, Christoph. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And Christoph is the head of e-commerce for Northern Europe at Kellanova.
Thank you.
Excellent. So let's go right into it. Christoph, tell us a bit about what you're doing at Kellanova, what your role is, and maybe a bit about Kellanova even for people that are not aware of it.
Yeah, so we had a spin-off in October. So until October, we were known as the Kellogg's company, and now we are branded as Kellanova. Now this is more internal. I mean, our brands are still Kellogg's for cereals and all the Pringles, so consumer-facing, no big change there. Project-wise, I had the chance to lead a really exciting project around B2B and D2C and marketplace. So what we did is, in the field of e-commerce, we started with white spot analysis, right?
But maybe before we go into that,
Yes.
just a bit about like your role. What if you were with a friend in a bar? Like, how would you define your role?
And speak slowly, because it's for me.
Well, I would say I have the pleasure to look after new channels such as B2B, D2C, and marketplace.
Excellent. And actually, Efrain, I realized that already I skipped a question. So if you want to ask it.
We are going with the flow, Daniel. It's all good. So actually, before we jump into Kellanova, I'd love to hear more about like your path to Kellanova, because you've had an opportunity to work at another large CPG brand or FMCG brand here in Europe as well. So tell us about before you got to Kellanova, what brought you there?
Yeah, so I started my career at Henkel in the headquarters in Düsseldorf, and I was category manager for the beauty care and the beauty care section. So I knew everything around hair coloration. And then I moved as an e-commerce manager to the home care section of the company. And after 4 years at Henkel, my wife and I decided to go on travel. So we quit my job and we traveled around the world for 5 months. And while I was traveling, I got the job offer at Kellogg's. And let me tell you, after that day, traveling was so much more relaxing. It was amazing.
I know now every time I go traveling, I'll be expecting like a job offer or something, no?
Just travel long enough and I'm sure it's going to happen.
Christoph, I was about to ask you that question. So is the advice for the group, if you want to do something new and exciting, travel for 5 months, but make sure it's global too.
Exactly. Go around the
There
world,
we go.
and if no job is coming around, maybe you become a surf teacher in Australia. Who knows?
I'm going to take that back to the US. If you want to do better in life, travel the world for 5 months, learn surfing at all costs.
Excellent. So tell us a bit about like how you approach e-commerce. So you talked about B2C, B2B, How do you approach that? Because obviously, e-commerce and FMCG is mostly done through retailers, that's B2B. But I know that you're also doing some B2C, so tell us a bit about that.
So we really started with a quick white spot analysis, right? So when you look at e-commerce and all the different channels, you have pure players, omni-channel, marketplace, quick commerce, meal aggregators, social commerce, and I'm sure I missed a lot of them. And then we saw that, what are the white spots? So it's own company shop, being D2C and B2B, marketplace, and social commerce. So that was the first step. And then the second was, does it really make sense, right? So if you look at our marketing campaigns and portfolio, it's all occasion-based.
Yeah.
So typically, you start the day with some cereals, then you have so breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, and then maybe a late night snack. So typically, hopefully, you start your day with a bowl of cereals, and you end it with some Pringles. And then we said, okay, so that's the journey, that's the day, but where do people consume the products? So I hope you all had a good breakfast here in Barcelona with some cereals, Kellogg cereals. So
Classical Barcelona cereals, of course.
Easy, Sri, easy.
That's a past life, man.
Oh, okay.
So hotel was one point. And then tomorrow when you fly back, you might go to a vending machine for some snacks. And on weekends, you go out to the cinema or on swimming pools. So those are all places where you consume our products, but you might also want to purchase them. But then we said, okay, how do we manage to sell directly to small and independent hotels? How do we manage to sell to cinemas or swimming pools? And that's really when we said, okay, we need to find a way to unlock this potential. And we said, okay, we need to redefine our minimum order quantities. We need to launch a shop and digitalize the whole process.
So, Christoph, what I love about that is that, whether it be e-commerce or if it was somebody who is thinking about their trade strategy more broadly, the consistent theme is that you started with the consumer, right? You started thinking about what are those occasions, where are those occasions happening, and then figured out, okay, now what do I do to fulfill those occasions? So I think that's something that is applicable whether you're dealing in digital commerce or whether you're dealing in any other sort of route to consumer.
Sri, because Sri, as head of sales in the US, e-commerce was part of your responsibility. But not only that, you got into head of sales in the US, having done a prior role in e-commerce. Does that way of approaching omni-channel, like B2B, B2C, and B2B even like in terms of out of home, is that similar to how you approached it in the US?
Yeah, so I think of it as three pieces. There's classic B2B, which is in the food business, Kellanova, great example, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, when you serve on-premise, when you serve food service, it's true B2B because they're buying in bulk, they're buying in truckloads. The most important variable there that the buyer or the retailer or the restaurant is going to care about in that B2B model is the technical details, package size, weight of the package. Not so much ratings and reviews, not so much SEO because it'll be irrelevant. They're already there on the site to buy the product, right? So B2B, very clear technical details. Then there's B2B2C, which is what FMCG primarily is.
FMCG Guys.
We should be in the business of selling T-shirts. That's
coming soon. That's coming soon. Don't anticipate it.
So FMCG, pretty clear, straightforward. B2B2C, search matters. I use a 5-letter term, scanner. Search, content, assortment, navigation, ratings, and reviews. That's B2B2C. Then there's B2C, which we also say D2C, direct to consumer. Images matter. Google search matters more than retail media-based search. So it's just the detail is in the technical details of which business model you're in, but there are clear marked differences across the board.
By the way, a call out for other sales directors. Look how technical he got being a sales director. Like, this is the sales director of today. I'm sorry. Like, you have to know these things, at least at a very basic level. And by the way, forgot one very important thing. We will have some minutes at the end, maybe like 10, 15 minutes for you guys to ask questions. It's the first time that we speak with such an audience, so we want to hear from the audience directly, so we will give turns for questions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about what we're talking about here. It can be about anything. Like, it can be very personal questions to Efrain and I as well, in case you're wondering.
Somebody please ask him about FC Barcelona and this year's performance.
If you want to see me cry, you can do that. So, and it,
Yeah, so I was going to say, so given that you've been, prior to taking the role for Northern Europe, you had been in that same role specifically for Germany, and the transformation that you've been able to drive for the German market is impressive. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that in terms of, like, could you kind of take us through that journey? And maybe start with, like, when you were first setting out, and I think you kind of started alluding to this, what were those keys to success in terms of doing that, driving that transformation?
So I believe the first key to success is really to have the buy-in from the top management, right? Because it is a huge transformational process, and it's something that was never done before in Europe. So you need to have the buy-in from the local market, but also from our headquarter in Dublin, or European headquarter. And I had the luck that our German general manager, he really wanted to have its own B2B platform, and he was really supportive. And the same goes for our European leadership team. So that was number one. And I think number two is, besides building P&Ls, I think you need to be clear on how to measure success and those KPIs. And then you look at the different channels, and I think the KPIs will be different. So if you look at B2B sales, it should be a sales and revenue channel and be profitable. But then if you look at maybe social commerce or D2C, it's more an awareness channel. So you look at KPIs like traffic, or how long do they stay on the page, or how many new subscribers to your newsletter you have. And then it's very important to have those KPIs, measure it, and then also redefine as you go.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead, Sri.
I have a follow-up, Christoph, if it's okay. So having come from a C-suite role myself as president of sales for General Mills, my own observation is most senior leaders in a corporate setting don't understand digital at all. And I'm fine saying that publicly because it's the truth. Kellanova, we have Julie Bowerman on the show, actually CPG Guys tomorrow. She's the CMO for Kellanova. So one of the questions I asked her, which I'd love to ask you, is in an environment where senior leaders still, brick and mortar, they know it inside out because they're raised with an assortment and how to manage it. What advice would you give people listening to this podcast, how to navigate the conversation with senior management to make sure that you can take them on the journey as opposed to asking them for money?
I think one easy way is maybe to show examples and to have a strong example of who did it already, and then to say, look, I think it really makes sense for us to think about such a tool as well, and we need it. And here's a list of arguments why we should do it, and look at the opportunities and, of course, also the risks there might be. But I think to just have an open and transparent communication is super important, and then it should work.
by the way, if somebody's just arrived, just a quick reminder, this is the FMCG guys here, interviewing on one side Christoph Sterkel, e-commerce head of Northern Europe at Kellanova, and Sri Rajagopalan, co-host of the CPG Guys and former president of sales of General Mills in the US. We're gonna give you the opportunity again to ask questions in a few minutes. So let's carry on though. Like when you think of like developing these capabilities of e-commerce, apart from stakeholder management, which we've kind of anticipated already, and obviously it's a battle, right? What other key challenges have you had, Christoph?
I think there were like probably 4 major challenges we had to overcome. So first was team resources and organization. The second would be all around IT infrastructure. Fourth is content and portfolio. Third is content and portfolio. And finally, supply chain and logistics. And maybe to give you an example around supply chain and logistics, if you look at our warehouse, we are specialized in full truckloads and single flavor pallets. And that doesn't really help us when it comes to e-commerce, right? We need to do small packages, pick and pack. All of a sudden, people are returning the products. That never happened before. So you need to find a new warehouse, you need to train the people, and to define the new processes.
It's interesting because it's a commercial role, but you're talking about the correct characteristics of a general management role effectively, because it's like super cross-functional, right?
Yeah, and that makes it so interesting.
Yeah, true. Sri, any other challenges that you encountered developing e-com capabilities in General Mills, or were you at J&J or PepsiCo before that?
For me, the number one, anytime I hired somebody to be in the e-commerce area versus the brick and mortar area, there was one skill set that I always looked for. It wasn't technical details around, does somebody know how to do search? Do they understand packaging will be different, etc.? I used to always try to hunt for intellectual curiosity. Is the person who wants the job somebody who's outgoing, reads? Reading doesn't mean a book necessarily. Could be listening to a podcast, could be reading an article. Do they post on LinkedIn? People who are curious can learn anything, and the second thing that people who are curious do is they teach others. They're not shy to pass that learning on to others as well. So for me, it was finding people who are intellectually curious is not as easy as it seems to the eye. They're very few and a rare breed.
Well, I can tell you firsthand, it's very difficult to hire top people, isn't it?
By the way, Daniel also runs a recruiting firm.
Yeah. Good plug, Daniel. Good plug. So, Christoph, I'm curious to now ask you a little bit more about, and you started to allude to some of this in regards to, like, for example, how you had to think about resourcing and infrastructure, and how that varied based on, having to build this new capability. What about your brand portfolio? Did you guys have to think about price pack architecture in a very different way than you would think about it, like, for example, when you were in a general category management role?
So we started to just sell, let's say, the standard portfolio and products that we have available in Germany. However, if you look at our D2C side, we will sell the regular size. But then if you log into the B2B side, that's where you will find 1,000 gram, 2,000 grams cereals, because that's what a hotel will need. So yes, there's a little bit of portfolio differentiation, but still only products that are available in Germany.
And just to follow up real quick, with regards to RGM or price pack architecture, is that a capability at Kellanova? And I'm curious about General Mills as well. Is that something that's specialized for e-commerce, or was that done at a more general level across all trade channels?
General Mills, we actually did it for every channel, made sure there was RGM for e-commerce. Prior to the pandemic and COVID, not so much, because the interest level in going digital in the food business was low. Pandemic changed everything. To anyone listening to this podcast, I would advocate pretty hard. The future is digital. Actually, today is digital. Forget about the future. The sooner one learns that it's all channels, e-commerce matters, the better off they'll be in their career. And most importantly, all of us in the FMCG space, our mission is our career matters, but we're trying to deliver for the consumer. The soon we understand that it's all channel, we'll deliver for the consumer.
Yeah, I think thinking e-commerce is super important, obviously. And you need to not only think about e-commerce, but it's a more general approach when it comes to RGM and having the right price pack architecture. Because we also have away from home, we have vending machines, we have so many different touch points, and you all need to include them into to your planning. And then in the end, it comes down to priorities, because unfortunately we can't do everything. But certainly it's included in the process to make sure that we have the right products that we need for e-com.
Efrain, you ask a very important question about revenue growth management at an important time in history, more than ever, because if you look at 2020 through 2023, because of inflation, most categories have grown in the FMCG, kind of middle of the store businesses, 15-20% is an average. And it's all inflation, so pricing at the end of the day, the dangerous P word. And now, in the last 2024, what are we, 5 months in? Most FMCG businesses set their growth targets based on the last 3 years, so +5, +7. That growth isn't there because money has dried up in the whole world. And so RGM is the only way to figure out how to navigate this crazy world of inflation go forward, where shrinkflation is about to hit us any single day.
What shrinkflation?
Shrinkflation, where it's the opposite of inflation, where you have, again, I don't want to use the deadly P word, but you really have to manage your price points pretty well for the consumer.
What's the deadly P word?
Pricing.
And
To be declared, pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer.
And one other thing, so you've talked about B2B, so basically managing like a lot of like on-trade accounts, right? Like hotels, Horeca, etc. We've had we spoke with Coca-Cola Hellenic on the podcast earlier this year, and the chief digital officer was talking about how they're building a platform around that. We've had other foods companies talking about that as well on the podcast. How are you approaching that? And I think that's a super important challenge for FMCG companies, like digitalizing that account management with these smaller accounts that you can't like sit down with all of them. How are you approaching that?
So I think it's all about the value proposition, right? So you need to have the right portfolio for the channel, and then you need to be able to offer them a little bit more. And that's what we are thinking of, and we will implement that soon, is POS materials. So if you go into a kiosk, there are like some hangers for the fridge where you can, like the Pringles can, they're like magnetic, then you can put them on the fridge and display them. So how do you distribute them? Well, one way will be through our B2B shop. And then you have like a reason why they should come through your platform. Or like a category management approach, right? Give them to download planogram for the kiosk, how to place the products. So besides having the right portfolio, you need to also offer them any added value, and then they will come to your platform and buy.
No, that's interesting. So it's basically empowering your customers, your smaller customers, to really, if you like, decorate their stores to make them more appealing, and ultimately that benefits you, no?
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, and I would say, it's interesting to hear you talk about that the POS materials serve a greater purpose than just being able to communicate whatever the latest campaign or the latest tagline is, right? So, I mean, being able to deliver that functional value on top of that from a POS standpoint, and you can think about it a lot of different ways, right? Some ways like sustainability, right, and making out of sustainable materials. There's a lot of different ways, but I love, like you said, having it something that is magnetic, which seems so simple, but it's just, it's a no-brainer, right? It makes total sense.
On top of that, I mean, then you also have the data. So you know exactly which kiosk or hotel ordered one of those. And then you can say, okay, in 2 years, I'm going to send them and reach out to them and say, listen, what's the status? Is it still looking good, or should we send you a new one? And after, maybe they say yes, maybe no, but latest 2.5 years later, you just send them one automatically, and then they replace it. And then it's also your brand within the shop, or even at the breakfast buffet, the dispensers are looking good, and it's brand equity.
Well, and I think you hit on something really interesting, which is thinking about the store not solely as a conversion vehicle, but thinking about it as for brand building as well, right? Because obviously it benefits Kellanova when that POS material is kept, refreshed, and it's kept looking the way that you want it to look. So it benefits you as well as the customer.
And then sometimes we also have brand relaunch, so the logo is changing, and you want to make sure that every point of sale has the new logo. So,
Christoph, I have a follow-up for you on what he talked about, brand building. Obviously, the POS is a great way to do that. But I have a pet peeve in all of FMCG worldwide. Last 4 years, QR codes have come back in a big way. QR codes are everywhere, right? You go to a restaurant, that's how you get your menu. You go, in fact, hotel room service, that's how you get your menu. QR codes is a way of life. Why has FMCG failed to adopt QR codes to the date? And are you guys at Kellanova, more importantly, are you guys at Kellanova looking at QR codes or any interesting way to communicate with the consumer from the POS?
it's a great question, and what I love about it, we didn't talk about this before, right? So what we've done in Germany last year, we had some QR codes on our Pringles can. And the idea was scan the code and then you get lives for like a game, click and fly. It's like Flappy Bird, it's a great game. And so you scan the code, and the idea was to go to the retailers and say, look, we have like a game, put the products on shelf, and we will drive people into your shop. So that's how we used QR codes. But then what we also did is, and now we're linking back and including our shop as a marketing tool. Once you played that game, you maybe had 5 lives. And once they were gone, we said, listen, if you are signing up for our newsletter, then we send you additional 5 or 10 lives for the game. And then that's how we just close the loop and manage to also use QR code for games, but then also push them to our shop.
Congrats, man. That's what I'm talking about.
You avoided Shri's pet peeve. Congratulations. just to know, and for a bit of time management, do people have will people have questions? Can somebody at least raise their hand?
We got one. So
Great.
hold that
Nathan,
thought.
Nathan, I know you have one as well. So
I'll go. So as you can tell, like this is actually a new thing for Daniel and I as well, because we usually are on WhatsApp texting each other to kind of make sure.
I'm
we
very
answer well.
excited. I'm just very happy and excited.
I'm amazed that you haven't stood up yet, to be honest with you.
Okay.
There you go.
I had to
All
do
right.
it.
No, so I kind of want to wrap this up in terms of like the capability building journey that you went on in Germany. And I'm curious to get like maybe your top 3 key outtakes from that experience in terms of like, you know, what have you taken from that and now into your new role as head of Northern Europe eCom?
So first would really be, if you go on such a transformational journey, and I said it before, you need to have the buying from the top management. I think that's super important. And the second one, it's quite a really interesting and makes it so fun. It's assumptions, right? So besides building a P&L and running the numbers, does that make sense? You also have assumptions. And for example, one assumption was on the D2C side, it's free shipping if it's above 40 euro, and below 40 euros, you have to pay 6 euro shipping fee. So I thought, okay, everyone will place an order for at least 40 euros and above. But then when you look at the data, you see that so many people are placing an order for 35, 36, 38 euros. And I'm like, that's interesting, because I would just put another 2 products in my basket, be above 40 euros, and have free shipping instead of paying 6 euro shipping fee. So having good assumptions, but then also to always look at those assumptions to see, are they still valid? And then pivoting, adapting, and then optimizing.
Can I ask a follow-up on that one? So you gave a fantastic example of the consumer, 38 euros instead of 40 to hit the free shipping threshold. So are you guys on the D2C experience doing anything to do basket building so you can push him to that 40?
I think this will be something for the future, is really how to become better at cross-selling. So as we speak, we're relaunching and redesigning the shop, so it will go live in the next couple of weeks. And hopefully then we will be able to have maybe cross-function or cross-selling functionality. We will also, at the very top, when you have your basket, like it will grow, and until 40, then the bar is full. So also to visualize, just go to 40 euros and it's for free.
Next couple of weeks, eh? So keep your eyes peeled.
Yes.
So, question time. And when flying this, Jackie Dinkowski from Flywheel, I think, has a question.
Thank you. So this is a two-parter for both yourself and Shri, where you talked about how Shri is the example of a sales director now because he's so technically knowledgeable about e-commerce. And then Shri, you said digital is now and everyone needs to be involved in it. So if you're looking at it from an e-commerce perspective, you know, going forward, say 5 years, do you see e-commerce as being a separate functionality within an FMCG or a CPG environment, client, or do you see it being enveloped within the other functions?
What a fabulous question, first of all, because today, in most FMCG companies and retail also, e-commerce sits as a separate entity. And what that does is it's actually disabling the ability of the rest of the company to learn digital skill sets. So a few companies, we did it at General Mills, we actually transitioned from one central e-commerce team to put people in individual teams, like the Walmart team, the Costco team, they all had e-commerce people on them. We also moved capabilities out from a central content team to into regions and into customer teams to be able to handle content. Same thing for retail media across the board. In the long run, in the next 5 years, I actually anticipate that's how the industry will go. And the simple reason for that is when penetration for e-commerce is 5, 10, 15%, you can keep it as a separate team. When it crosses 20, 25, usually for any FMCG company, you'll have one big retail partner that's 25, 30% of your business. In Europe, that could be Tesco. In the US, that's Walmart. And when your e-commerce overall penetration becomes that large, you need to put it within the teams. So the world is starting to progress that way, and I hope senior leaders listen to our podcast and actually do the right thing.
They do. I can just add that the e-commerce is kind of forcing, like we've talked about supply chain, we've talked about marketing, so it's kind of being a catalyst for like the functions to get together more, because if not, it's like dysfunctional.
And Christoph, you're going to be hot commodity at that point because every team should want a guy like you.
Why do you think
Thank
I'm in
you.
touch with him? So, any more questions about, it doesn't necessarily have to be about e-commerce, about retail in general, how we see it, about the podcast? Hi, what's your name?
I'm Abby. I'm from BIC. And I have a question. We talked a lot about D2C, B2B2C, all the different channels. And I'm wondering, it's been a trend for some CPGs to be building a D2C presence and mainly for first-party data purposes. And I'm wondering if you think it's really worth it if the infrastructure doesn't exist yet, and it's obviously a large investment for a CPG.
So when we did that white spot analysis, of course, D2C was also one area where we said, okay, we don't have it. But then we had to build quite a lot of capabilities. And why we did it was more to go after B2B customers and less to unlock D2C. But then we said, okay, we now have a shop, we now have fulfillment capabilities. Why not opening up to D2C as well? Because everything is already set in place. And that's basically why we did it. So,
Yeah, it's interesting how like FMCGs are building the capabilities of direct-to-consumer, not for the reasons they thought they would, if that makes sense. So,
Abby, is it Abby? Abby, you're actually highlighting a huge weakness of FMCGs to be creatures of following the past. Our training, 30 years in FMCG myself, some of the biggest brands in the world, right? The training is always repeat last year's. All our planning starts with last year's historicals. This is like such a bad flaw that by now we should have learned from the pandemic. None of that nonsense should be existing, but yet we haven't. But you mentioned the number of times I hear in the industry we should only do D2C for first-party data is absolutely crazy. Absolutely D2C should be done for first-party data, but then the flaw is it shouldn't be done just for gathering data. D2C presents an awesome vehicle for any brand of any size, any scale to test innovation. And if you look at a challenge large FMCGs have today, as they try to get shelf space in the store, smaller D2C brands are the one who are taking away that shelf space in the store. If you want to compete, a retailer would love to have a conversation with an FMCG brand that walks in and says, I have already got qualitative data on what consumers think about this. And by the way, it's this big and I can show it to you. Much better to fight shelf assortment that way. And I think it's a flaw we have in FMCG that I've myself had arguments with brand presidents all across the world for various CPG brands on this topic.
well, hate to give you the bad news, but we're running out of time. Thanks everyone for joining us. It was wonderful to do this. And remember to leave us a review, please. Leave us a review.
And follow us on LinkedIn, CPG Guys and FMCG.
And I think we have this Brave Commerce podcast coming up if you want to stay. And I think they also have a guest from Kellanova. So Kellanova scored high today.